God bless you. If you've ever looked at the night sky and felt something you couldn't explain, not wonder exactly, but something closer to warning, you've probably told yourself it wasn't real. You've probably chalked it up to stress, to the hour, to a mind that was tired and looking for patterns that weren't there. But what if it was real? My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a 52-year-old observational astronomer. I've spent my career measuring the cosmos. I publish papers. I teach. I train the instruments. I trust the data. What I'm about to tell you is not a dream. It is not a hallucination brought on by stress or sleep deprivation. It is something that happened to me, something I cannot explain away, and something that changed every single thing I thought I knew about the sky I spent my life studying. It happened in April, late April. Both comets were up, Comet Aleph and Comet Beth, as I'd taken to calling them in my logbook. 2 comets. Same sky. Same window of weeks, a convergence my models flagged as statistically improbable before I stopped trusting the models. I had been awake for 36 hours. My hands were shaking, not from fear, I told myself, from coffee, from cold. The observatory is never warm in April, even when spring pretends to have arrived outside. I was alone in the building, as I had been most nights for 3 weeks. I was at the eyepiece, entering data I couldn't make add up, running the same calculations for the 4th time hoping to get a different answer. And I remember the exact moment I stopped writing numbers. I just stopped, hands still, pencil on the logbook page, looking at those 2 points of light crossing the same section of sky, and feeling something I hadn't let myself feel since I was 23 years old. Not awe. Something older than awe. Something that felt like being seen. I still don't have a scientific word for it, but I know now what it was. And I know why it terrified me. Not as a scientist, but as something deeper I hadn't been in 30 years. I should tell you who I was before that night, because the story only makes sense if you understand what it took to break the man I had built. I became an astronomer because I believed in the permanence of data. Stars don't lie, numbers don't lie. The universe operates by laws that are consistent, indifferent, and knowable. And in that knowability, I found something close to peace. I grew up nominally Christian, Sunday services, a Bible on the shelf. It was background noise, the kind of faith that dissolves quietly when you spend 4 years in graduate school learning to explain everything. No crisis, no dramatic break. I just replaced God with data and didn't look back. I married Renata 17 years ago. She teaches high school science and has always carried a quiet faith I never argued with because I didn't take it seriously enough to argue. She was warm where I was cold, present where I was somewhere overhead, 3,000 light years out, calculating distances. There was a joke in our house. Marcus could tell you the position of a star 10 million miles away but couldn't find the car keys. It wasn't funny by the time the comets appeared. Comet Aleph was discovered in February, unremarkable by most measures. A long-period comet on an inbound trajectory, expected to reach peak visibility in late April. Comet Beth was confirmed 3 weeks later. Similar profile, different origin. And the angular separation at peak visibility, when both would share the same sky, was something my orbital calculations kept spitting out as wrong before I accepted they were right. 2 comets. 1 April sky. A convergence position that matched nothing in the historical record for the past 400 years. I remember standing in the kitchen when the confirmation came through on my laptop. Renata was at the table grading papers. I didn't tell her what I was looking at. If this is just orbital mechanics, I told myself, why can't I stop feeling like I'm reading something? And if I'm reading something, what am I afraid it says? The weeks between that morning and my collapse have a quality I can only describe as accelerating. Each night in the observatory, the feeling built. Each morning back home, I pushed it down. I stopped sleeping properly, skipped meals, canceled 2 classes without explanations. My department chair accepted graciously, but my students didn't deserve. The logbook, the one I'd kept meticulously for 22 years, recorded in the same careful hand, started filling with questions that had no business being in a scientific logbook. Why these two? Why together? Why now? Renata noticed. She always notices things I think I've hidden. She came to the observatory twice that month. The second time, she stood in the doorway in her coat and looked at me in a way that asked a question without words. I deflected. Told her the numbers were interesting. Told her I was almost done. I wasn't almost done. The night it happened was April 24th. Both comets at peak brightness. The angular separation that had haunted my calculations was now visible through the eyepiece as a clean, impossible pairing. 2 points of light in the same field of view, converging trajectories crossing the same section of sky for the first and last time. I reached for my phone. I was going to call Renata. I didn't. I held the phone, and I put it down, and I turned back to the eyepiece. And that is the last thing I remember before the chest pain hit. It wasn't subtle. It was a wall. I dropped. The logbook went with me. The campus emergency log records the call at 11:22 p.m. The paramedics reached the observatory at 11:31. At 11:34 p.m., my heart stopped. Time of death. 11:34 p.m. I was dead for 9 minutes. I need you to understand that what happened next is not something I have a framework for. Not because I lacked the vocabulary. I'm a scientist. I knew what the literature said about near-death experience. I knew what the brain does under oxygen deprivation. I had the full toolkit of materialist explanations ready before any of this happened. None of it touches what I experienced. The first thing that happened was not darkness. It was the removal of sound, not silence, which implies the absence of something temporary, but the complete erasure of the category of sound itself, as if it had never existed as a property of the universe. One moment, the world had noise. Then it didn't. Then it had never had noise. Then I was aware. Completely impossibly aware, more awake than I have ever been in 52 years of living, in a space that had no edges, no temperature, no direction. I tried to move, and discovered that movement required a body, and I had left the body in the observatory. There was a pressure, not physical, something older, something that had no analogy in any physics I had ever studied. Then a vibration, below any frequency I could have measured. Then light broke through. It lacked the familiar warmth of a candle or a star seen from Earth. This was light as it exists in open space, cold, vast, and entirely sourceless. The kind of light that doesn't need an origin because it precedes origin. I had no telescope, no instruments, no equations. I was a man who had spent 3 decades building a complete toolkit for understanding the universe, and every single one of those tools was gone. And here is what I remember most about that moment, before the presence became distinct. The terror was not fear of death. I had already died. The terror was something else entirely. I had no way to measure anything here. I was completely without the thing that had made me who I thought I was. The light kept coming closer. The light resolved. It didn't take the form of a defined shape or a face. Instead, it became a presence, specific, unmistakable, and unlike anything I had ever constructed a defense against. I knew without a moment's hesitation who this was. My certainty didn't come from a painting or some half-remembered sermon. The recognition was older than memory. It was the recognition of someone I had always known and spent 30 years walking away from without once admitting that was what I was doing. Jesus. I say that word knowing exactly how it lands. I said it to the hospital chaplain. I said it to Renata. I said it to Dr. Osei, who listened with the professional patience of a physician managing a distressed patient. I have no other word. It was him. He didn't speak about the comets first. He spoke about me. One line, not a question, but framed like one, because it required an answer I could not escape. And in the space of it, I felt 30 years collapse. Marcus, you spent your life studying the love letter. You just never let yourself read it. That was it. It doesn't look like much written down. But in that space, those words dismantled everything I had constructed to keep this moment from happening. Every argument I had ever made for the indifference of the cosmos. Every time I had chosen the data over Renata. Every class where I had taught students that the universe operated without intention or care. Every night, I had looked through that eyepiece and refused to ask the question underneath the question I was asking. I wasn't a scientist who had failed to find God. I was a man who had found the evidence everywhere and refused to read it. The grief was immediate. 30 years of it, arriving all at once. Then, he turned to the comets. Take this truth with you. Some evidence was always there. The question was never whether it existed. The question was whether I was willing to look. What happened next bypassed language entirely. I was simply shown the truth. 3 scenes, 3 things I carried back. In the first, I saw the Earth. Gone was my telescope's perspective, the coordinates, and the orbital data. Instead, I viewed our world the way you might see a room from the ceiling above it. And what I saw was this: 2 brilliant lights crossing the sky overhead. Comet Aleph and Comet Beth, burning in April's darkness, visible to anyone with eyes and the willingness to look up. And almost no one was looking up. I saw a world absorbed in itself. Screens, noise, conflict moving at the speed of a news cycle. I don't say this as judgment. I was one of those people, and I had a telescope. I looked at those comets every night for weeks, and still chose my calculations over the question they were asking. The world below those lights wasn't evil. It was distracted. And distraction, I understood in that moment, is exactly the opposite of looking up. The first vision ended, but the biggest revelation was yet to come. In the second, I was shown something that felt like history, not a timeline or a lecture, but a pattern, like a man who has spent years cataloging individual stars, suddenly seeing the constellation they formed together. Converging signs, 2 lights appearing together in the same sky, have preceded every era of consequence in the arc of this world. I saw this the way you see the obvious thing you somehow missed for years. Every time, 2 signs, together, before a turning. But this wasn't a turning toward destruction. It was a turning toward invitation. This is the last such invitation before the season changes. The terror I felt wasn't about a physical impact or global disaster. It was simpler and more devastating than that. The comets were not a threat. They were a door, and doors close. In the third vision, I saw the ones who responded. They didn't rely on elaborate rituals or religious performances. They chose the simplest act available to any human being: turning, lifting their eyes from the noise, recognizing what was being offered. It was the same recognition I had just experienced in that space, available to anyone, accessible to everyone, and closing like a door on a timer. Then, he spoke to me directly. You studied the signs in the sky your entire life. You were always meant to read this one. I had spent 30 years building the most sophisticated possible form of not seeing what was right in front of me. And he had waited, all 30 of those years, not with impatience, not with judgment, but with the particular patience of someone who always knew how the story ended. After the visions, something broke open in me. The collapse was instantaneous. 30 years of arguments against God, the careful intellectual architecture I had built, paper by paper, calculation by calculation, came apart like paper in water. He offered no counter-arguments. He didn't need to. The arguments had been scaffolding around an absence, and in his presence, the absence was simply gone. What came through was grief. The specific grief of wasted time. The image of Renata standing in the observatory doorway in her coat. The phone I had picked up and put down. 17 years of a good woman offering warmth I had been too busy calculating distances to receive. I expected condemnation. I want you to understand that. Because you may be carrying the same expectation right now. The idea that if God ever became real and present and close, the first thing he would do is enumerate your failures. That did not happen. What came instead was something I have spent months trying to find adequate language for. It encompassed forgiveness and love, yet went beyond both. The closest I can come is this. I felt the specific, unrepeatable experience of being known entirely. Every avoidance, every choice, every year of deliberate silence, and still chosen. He embraced me through all of it, rather than despite it. God wasn't a judge waiting with a verdict. He was a presence that had been standing in the room the entire time I was pretending the room was empty. Take this truth with you. You do not have to die to come home. The door was always open. The question is whether you're willing to stop calculating and walk through it. The peace was real. I want to be honest about that, because I've heard people describe near-death experiences as if returning to your body is an easy, obvious choice. It was not easy. The peace in that space was the most complete thing I have ever experienced. There are no instruments for it, no scale, no comparison available in any data I've ever collected in 52 years of living. Staying was a genuine option. And he didn't hide that from me. He didn't command me to return. He asked, and he asked with the full knowledge of what I would face if I said yes. The colleague who would smile carefully and suggest I speak to someone. The patient, clinical explanation from Dr. Osei about what happens to the brain under cardiac arrest. The impossibility of standing at the front of a lecture hall teaching the mechanistic universe when I know what I know now. The strangeness of going back to the telescope the same way I left it. The comets are still visible, he said. The window is still open. But this message needs a witness who cannot be dismissed as a dreamer. It needs someone who spent their career establishing that nothing in the sky is arbitrary. It needs an astronomer. Now, Marcus, you can choose. Stay in this peace, or carry it back. That was it. The choice was mine. Then reality hit. Ceiling tiles. White. Fluorescent light that had no depth, no source, no warmth. The sharp antiseptic smell so sudden, it felt like a physical impact. The rhythmic beeping of a monitor tracking the heart that had stopped. I was back. The nursing notes record that cardiac rhythm was restored at 11:43 p.m., 9 minutes after time of death. 9 minutes. The first thing I saw clearly was Renata. She was holding my hand. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. The kind of crying that leaves a face stripped down to the real thing underneath it. She was looking at me the way she had looked at me in the observatory doorway, except this time there was no question left to ask, and she was already holding on. I thought of the phone I had picked up and put down. I couldn't speak. Dr. Osei came in shortly after. Calm, thorough, professional. A careful man in his late 50s who had clearly been managing difficult conversations for decades. He explained what had happened. Cardiac event. 9 minutes. Successful resuscitation. Lucky was the word he used, which I understood to be a generous translation of the actual statistics. I told him what I experienced. He listened with the full, careful attention of a physician managing a distressed patient. He did not argue. He offered a neurological framework. The brain under oxygen deprivation, the temporal lobe, the documented patterns of near-death phenomenology. And I watched him explain it. And I recognized him. He was me, 30 years ago. The brilliant, compassionate man with no category for what he was hearing, because he had built a framework that was missing one essential room. I looked past him at the hospital window. Still April outside, both comets still up there, crossing that same section of sky. Visible to anyone who looked. I knew without checking that the window was still open. I did not go back to the observatory first. I went home. I sat at the kitchen table where Renata grades papers, and I told her everything. I skipped the scientific details and the medical reports. I gave her the real account. The void, the light, the presence, the 3 visions, the line about the love letter, the phone I had picked up and put down, the 30 years. She did not offer me a framework. She did not manage me. She listened the way she has always listened, with the particular stillness of a woman who has been waiting a long time for her husband to come back from wherever he had gone. Something long closed opened between us at that kitchen table. I will not reduce it to a sentence, but I will say this. The first evidence that what I experienced was real was not a confirmed comet trajectory or a medical report. It was the look on my wife's face when I finally stopped calculating and told the truth. I went to the logbook the next morning. 22 years of data, careful columns. Every observation I had ever made, annotated and dated in the same hand. I opened it to the page after the last calculation, the one I had been working on when I collapsed, and I began to write. Not equations. The testimony. Specific, dated, named. The account of a man who spent his career establishing that nothing in the sky is arbitrary, who was shown by the one who made the sky that the two lights crossing April's darkness were the farthest possible thing from arbitrary. Comet Aleph and Comet Beth are still visible as I write this. The door that they represent is still open. I am not asking you to take my word for anything. I am an astronomer. I don't ask anyone to take my word for it. I ask them to look. Have you looked up lately? Have you felt what I felt before I could name it? That sensation of standing under something vast and specific and aimed directly at you? You might mistake it for anxiety, or just the noise of the modern world finding new ways to confuse you. But it is an invitation. The comets are passing. The window is closing. If this testimony has reached you while those lights are still in the sky, that is not coincidence. That is the same patience that waited 30 years for a stubborn astronomer to stop running his calculations and look up. If this story touched something real in you, share it. Let someone else look up. Leave a comment and tell me what you feel when you look at the sky tonight, because I believe you already know more than you've let yourself admit. Subscribe if you want to keep hearing what I'm learning. And if you have your own story of something you couldn't explain, something that felt like it was meant for you, tell me. Because the truth sets us free, all of us. God bless you.